very significant day as we remember Dr. Jose Rizal. Let me say that some years back, a second Malolos Congress was attempted, and in fact, it was held at Club Filipino. It was precisely called that, Second Malolos Congress. And some of those who attended that Congress were the late General Abat, the late Secretary Enriquez, and the late Congressman and NLRC Chairman Roy Señeres. They were the ones who acted as the officers of the Congress. Roy Señeres acted as the presiding officer. General Abat was the one commissioned by the Congress in the resolutions that the Congress adopted. And Secretary Enriquez also acted as one of the officers together with me, who at that time facilitated the session of the Congress. What were decided in that Congress? There were three resolutions. One is to declare that there is a state of crisis in the country. And this was some years back, about a decade ago or more. And the state of crisis was described in the sense as the absence of a process by which to really bring about real change, meaning that the electoral process, as well as the other processes provided under the 1987 Constitution, were no longer sufficient or responsive in order to address the many issues and concerns of the country, and most especially the pivotal or primordial concern of bringing real change, and that is in terms of the power structure. And since the electoral and other processes were no longer responsive to that imperative need, the Congress resolved to direct General Fortunato Abad to execute the Congress resolution to adopt alternative means by which to bring about that change. And third, the third resolution of the Congress is that as General Abat was directed to execute those alternative ways or means by which to bring about real change, is to organize the force that is necessary in order to promote that interest of bringing about real change. Now, that Malolos Congress was followed later on by a declaration of a transition government in Club Filipino, which led to the arrest of General Abat, of Secretary Enriquez, all of whom have gone together with Ambassador and Congressman Roy Señeres and myself. And that declaration actually was attended by press people from all over the world, because they really expected that the military will actually shift their allegiance if people power was against demonstrated. And but before any kind of critical mass could be assembled in Club Filipino or around the vicinity of Club Filipino, then President Macapagal Arroyo already ordered that the meeting in Club Filipino be dismantled, you may say, and that all the leading personalities were arrested. And then inciting to sedition charges were filed against the four of us. And up to now, very recently, just about 3 months ago, this inciting to the sedition charge was revived in the City Court of San Juan. And since I'm the only one left among the four, I'm the only one standing trial for that inciting to sedition. Well, I am citing this not so much to highlight what my compatriots have done, to whom I'm also paying tribute today, and may they all rest in peace in the love and care in the bosom of our Almighty Father in heaven. But to show that this flame that you are trying to enkindle and to become a conflagration continues to burn in the hearts of many of our people, especially now that we are approaching again another electoral exercise. Inasmuch as we have considered this process really as an exercise in political insanity. We have a group that we have organized, the Kamalayang Pinoy movement, which took that as its battle cry to end our political insanity. And why do we call it political insanity? Because as Einstein has defined insanity as doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, then if you apply that to our politics, that is exactly what we are doing. We are conducting one electoral or political exercise after another, and we expect that by simply changing the leaders, we can already expect real change to happen in the country. But we all know, as students of both politics and history, that that is not how real change happens. In other words, it follows a dialectical process. But most especially in the case of our country, referring now to Dr. Rizal and the other founding fathers, the one that brought about the end of 400 years of colonization of Spain is more of the spiritual force that started to build in the hearts and minds of our people. And it is that spiritual force which gradually expressed itself into a political force that effectively ended Spanish rule. The same thing will have to happen here. It will have to be the spirit of our people, which will have to be the source of strength that and power that will make them realize that it is not this process that we consider to be insane that will bring it about. However, participation in the process can provide the opportunity to precisely drive home that message. And hopefully, we will have candidates who, notwithstanding the absence or the lack of wherewithal which are needed in order to be part of the electoral process, can mount the stage and deliver that process to our countrymen. Our generation now, from being the catalyst generation, is already the transition generation. We have very little time to handhold the next generation and the new ones in order for them to stay connected to the ideals of our founding fathers. And those ideals are mostly and more significantly and pivotally spiritual. And that spiritual power will have to be converted into political power. We had a glimpse of that in 1986 when people came to the streets, not so much because they were partisan to the two antagonistic groups, no? But rather they were there to make sure that Filipinos did not shoot fellow Filipinos. So it is the spirit of brotherhood, of care and love for each other, the spirit of peace that brought them to the streets. Now, from the spirit of peace and brotherhood, we will have to also now have the spirit of boldness of being true to what we call as the destiny of our country, is the lupang hinirang. The lupang hinirang as an anointed land and of the character of our people as a chosen and a refined people, Pili and Pino. No? And that I learned from the ranks of what we call in this country as the Kapatiran Spiritual Brotherhood. The Pulahanes, as you mentioned earlier, were precursors, forerunners of these spiritual brotherhoods. the Sagrada Familia, and the many others which adopted spiritual things and who have devotions to saints and as well as to our Blessed Mother and the Lord Jesus Christ. They were the ones who provided that strength and power needed to bring about change. Will that happen in the near future, where our generation, as I said, is now challenged to do that? We are now the transition generation. From Catholics in the 1970s, we are still given the opportunity, the golden chance to handhold our young people into the land of dreams that our Dr. Jose Rizal mentioned. And Dr. Jose Rizal said, out of the 7 prophecies that he made, there are only 2 more which are still unfulfilled. And that is that the country will become federal in the future. And the last prophecy is that when our people recover, remember their good old qualities and virtues, then they will now be ready to join the wide road of progress. And so, Dr. Hill, I thank you for this opportunity for you to rekindle that spirit of our founding fathers. Because just as in the United States, whenever they face a crisis, they go back to the Madison Papers. They go back to the founding fathers and the principles that they have upheld and they have propounded. So in the same way, we have to go back to our founding fathers of this country with the addition that in it is really their spirituality which became the source of the real power. Thank you, Dr. Hill, and all others for the opportunity to share my insights into this exercise that you're doing this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Attorney Carlos Serapio. And would Attorney Serapio yield to some questions from the group?
Of course, of course. Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm willing to yield to the
questions for Attorney Serapio. Raise your hand and I'll recognize you. Go ahead, Dr. Posadas. You have no questions?
Yes, yeah, to Attorney Serapio, please.
Yes.
So Attorney, what was the basis of your arrest?
Well, sedition was the charge. Inciting to sedition was the charge. And up to now, they're still trying to determine whether the establishment or the proclamation of a transition government can be considered as an act of inciting to sedition.
Okay. Were you arrested without a warrant of arrest?
That is true, Dr. Posadas. We were arrested without warrants of arrest. But of course, the arresting officers contended that we were in the act of violating the law.
Yeah. Had you started with a invocation or to invoke the presidential oath of office in the Constitution to redress people's grievances? Because what you were doing was not sedition. It was a call for change. It's not a rebellion. There's a difference. Sedition to rebellion. You were not inciting rebellion. That's what sedition is all about. Change is not necessarily sedition. So if there was some kind of a basis that you first invoked the oath of office of the president to redress grievances, then you could have from the court, then you could probably one way or the other had some kind of a petition with the Supreme Court that should have stopped it right there and then. So when you say that, in a way, what we're doing will most probably have the same result, which is a political insanity, I understand that. But in the same token, the result was never determined. So we don't know if the same result will happen to our political cause, because our cause is in the political realm of the people's will.
So, Dr. Posadas, can you cap your statement with a question? You have a question that Attorney Serapio has.
Yeah, that was my question. They were not arrested with a warrant of arrest. They were just on the spot on the basis of what you call a crime in progress, or in the relicto. So that was an illegal arrest in the first place. And what were your actions to defend yourself, Attorney Serapio?
Well, you provided a very good insight precisely on what should be the basis for the exercise that we did in Club Filipino. We were exercising our constitutional right, as you mentioned, Doctor, of seeking redress or for grievances, also of the very primordial or fundamental right of freedom of speech.
Correct.
So the constitutional protection was invoked by us. No? But as you know, during the time, this was during the time of the former president, and as far as we are concerned, we have no beef anymore and against any or all former presidents. It was an exercise of our political conviction as well, no? And therefore we were ready to bear the consequences of that. But I said you bring to the for a very good insight, because even at this late stage, when I'm the only one left in that trial, which in fact is going to be held again this coming August 2nd, no? In as much as our demurrer to evidence was denied, after this has gone on for about 17 years, I think already, Doctor, no? We may just bring that issue to the Supreme Court, and I think I will look into that again, no? Because this is a different dispensation now, where you have no less than the president, in fact, saying that we should not be talking in secret of revolutionary government, but rather this should be openly discussed by the people, whether the establishment of a revolutionary government is an option that we should take in order to bring about change. So because of different times and different circumstances, your proposition of bringing a constitutional challenge to the Supreme Court for my continuing, having to continue facing this charge of inciting to sedition, which, as you said, is supposed to lead just to rebellion, then that just may be a test case. Thank you, Doctor, and I will take that very seriously under indictment. Now, as far as the political insanity that I mentioned, I am not referring to the political initiative that we are doing now. I am referring to the repeated electoral processes that we're conducting, where one cannot participate in the process unless you have millions and now billions of pesos. If you intend to run, for example, for president, immediately the mind of the public says the only one who should be able to do that is one who has billions in his coffers. So the only ones who are now being considered are those people there. So that negates precisely the constitutional provision where all you need to have as a qualification in order to run is that you are literate and that you are a natural born citizen. I mean, there is no qualification that you should have billions of pesos. But operationally, that is what it is. And why is it also an act of political insanity? Because as after that, we expect that the recoupment of the investment, if you may call it, by those who run for office will not come from the coffers of government. Third, it is political insanity because it is a question of just in and out of the same interest. So that's what we are referring to as the insanity, because we expect that there will be a different result simply because there's going to be a change of leadership. And if you will note that now, Doctor, the call is to make sure that the incumbent president does not have the opportunity to continue his administration through his chosen candidate. If that is going to be the call to our people, again, it's just a game of musical chair. That is not a game of really bringing about real change. I mean, it is natural for the incumbent to want to have a successor that will continue what he believes to be a good program for this country. But the real issue to the people should be whether what he brought to the table during his administration is enough for the people to want to vote his successor, his chosen successor. But in this case, we are making the issue of removal of the incumbent president as if that is the panacea for all of our problems that we are facing now. At the moment, the country is facing a threefold crisis: a foreign policy crisis in the West Philippine Sea, and a health crisis in the pandemic, and then the social and the political fallouts that come from these two crises of the West Philippine Sea and the pandemic. So you have joblessness, poverty, etc., and the rest. How will this be addressed? How will this threefold crisis now be addressed? Simply by changing the president, simply by not voting into office whoever may be his chosen successor? That is not the proposition that we would like to make. In short, if I may be allowed to invoke a biblical admonition, we cannot just change the wine. We have to change the wine skin. So in the same way, new blood that is infused into the political processes must run through a new political system, a new political structure. That is how change happens. And when I said change happens dialectically, there has to be a change in external conditions as well as in the internal character of those who are experiencing those conditions. And there has to be qualitative, rather quantitative accumulation first of forces and power before it brings about qualitative force that can really bring about that change. And when I say real change, I'm referring to the power structure. And the power structure basically is the empowerment of our people. Real change can happen only if our people now start to bring their destiny into their own hands and start looking at simply at the leaders that they will elect to be the ones to bring that about. So anyone who mounts the stage and proposes, okay, I will be the one to do this, I'll be the one to do that, is again putting himself as if he is the one that can really solve the problems of our country. No, as I said, Doctor, and I hope you will forgive me for my being very passionate about this, we have to become all Juan orations. Why are we going to be Juan orations? Because the prayer for change that we make, the answer is in ourselves as well. The answer is inside us already. It is in our spirit that will make us. The oración is the prayer. So Juan must be the prayer himself. He is not only the one making or saying the prayer, but Juan is also the answer to his prayer. And that is the kind of spirit that we need, I think, to try and deliver as a message to our people. And so if the political and election conversation continues to be who is supposed to be the one who can really replace or be the successor of the incumbent president, is it person A, B, C, D, E? And therefore, if you choose among any of these A, B, C, D, E, you can expect change. Then that means, again, we are in the exercise of what I call political insanity, because we expect a different result if that happens, but we will only reap frustrations and disappointments once again. And the sad thing about it is, do we still have time? I mean, this country is running out of time in terms of really strengthening us as a nation that can actually now be a part in the new dynamics in the international community. So we need to understand where the country is situated at the moment. And I think our national heroes with Dr. Sepi Rizal are really now very much agitated wherever they are in the bosom of bliss and joy. They cannot experience that joy that even heaven perhaps can offer them because of what they see that is happening in our country. So I can see Doctor. I don't know about the others, Dr. Hill. I think all of us here are senior citizens. senior citizens who in the 70s or late 60s, as I said, were the youth at the time. We were catalyzing. We were the ones that brought about the epiphany, the awakening of the need for change in our country. 60 years after, we are still singing the same song of change. And we are still hoping that there has been enough quantitative forces which have been generated that can bring about the qualitative change in our political, economic, social, and cultural situation. But more so, as I said, everything springs from our spirit as a people. The spirit of being one, a people who love God dearly, and a people who have their sense of brotherhood, our care and concern for each other. So how do we now manifest that? How do we give witness to that in our politics? And
Yeah. So, Attorney Serapio, please read our recent resolution, and that covered everything you said.
Thank you, Dr. Po. I will.
Say,
And